All right, Millennium. Violence. So we are in chapter 2 or part 2 of the book. We've gone through the prelude and the chapter 1, the foreword and chapter 1. And we have 5 chapters in the book. So let's get to number 2. The struggle. So it's called the struggle for supremacy. The struggle for supremacy. Dictatorships are collapsing throughout the world, on every continent and in every hemisphere. No tyrant is able any longer to seal himself off successfully from the tide of democracy. And what's happening in Syria is a good reminder of this. Electronic communications and television render borders porous. Traditional notions of national sovereignty are increasingly irrelevant. National sovereignty, yep, it's a dying concept. The dead concept almost. Trump's tried to bring it back and received with much hate. The fax machine and the video cassette make it possible to pierce the veil of state censorship. And isn't that what I'm doing here? Nevertheless, even if the world seems daily to be growing closer, more homogeneous in its cultural values and material aspirations, even if large corporations, even if the world seems daily to be growing closer and closer, like the world becoming a small world, and more homogeneous in its cultural values and material aspirations, where multiculturalism stands and it's a death of all previous cultures. Even if large corporations are establishing themselves in all countries, that's the elite that we see, the CEOs like Steve Jobs or Zuckerberg. Power remains in the hands of an elite. An elite, moreover, and that's what I was just saying, that resides in those few places where power and wealth accumulate, where the critical questions facing the planet are decided. So isn't that interesting? Who was the richest man? Jeff Bezos, they said? And he was the CEO of Amazon, and he resided in Europe, not in America. Because America, as he's saying, is dying. And it was the old center, but now there's going to be a new center in Europe or China, most likely. The eighth market form, whose center is New York, is rent by a severe crisis. It faces fierce competition. Other regions of the world desire to become the center of a new market form. It is too early to predict with certainty where the future center of the world economy will be. This is in 1990. But we can see already a new world struggling to be born, heralding a new age of development. The culture of choice, or put it in other words, the imperative of the market and democracy, is itself acting as midwife to the emerging ninth market form. So that's the liberal pluralism that he was talking about. The culture of choice. And a great documentary on the changes of culture in the last century with a focus on America and Europe was the documentary called The Century of the Self. I highly suggest, if you're interested in learning about the history of the culture in which you currently exist, to have a view of the century of the self. It's on YouTube. So the imperative of the market and democracy is itself acting as a midwife to the emerging ninth market form. The ability to create, to produce, to trade is inextricably bound up with the spread of political pluralism, the multiculturalism I was talking about. And so, yeah, I mean, we have all these cities, and they're all metropolitan cities all over the world, where the rich nomads mentioned earlier travel. And in these different cities, basically, you see the culture is pretty much similar, you know, all the styles even. I remember coming to Korea out of India when I first was immigrating to the West, and the first stop was in Korea, and the kids there were wearing the same stuff that the gangsters were being promoted to wear, you know, the gangster culture in the 90s in America, in California especially. So, I mean, the kids in Korea were wearing these funny little baggy pants, and I was like, what the hell are these guys wearing? But in America, even the gangster types would be wearing that, you know? So it was interesting to see that. But yeah, political pluralism. What's going on in the streets and parliaments in Budapest and Soweto, in Santiago and Moscow, reflects this evolutionary process. This evolution will disturb present-day economic and national security arrangements. I guess that was the reason for 9/11, because it was an evolution. And will alter the rules of geostrategy, for in the aftermath of the ideological hostility of the Cold War, geography will again impose its laws on history. So then we go into the past half century, and I guess more about the Cold War. So he's saying geography will become important now again, because of the new market form coming up, and therefore geostrategy is different in this millennium, because the Cold War is over. So there's a different ideological process going on. Then geography will become important again, on history at least. So that's why Afghanistan war, they said, never get entangled in Afghanistan, or it will destroy your country. And that's pretty much what happened in America, it seems. I think that was a Chinese general who quoted that about Afghanistan, not somebody currently. Anyway, I'm going to take a little break. Alright, actually, I don't think I have time to smoke right now, so... Oh, this is really interesting. Alright, I'll be back to it in my next video.